Hey everyone, welcome back to the series 2 of The Art of Change. This is Compassion Unleashed. I'm Tony Stark Fernandez, the Change Catalyst, and we are back with Julie Krause, and we're going to be talking about today leading with compassion and turning intention into impact. So this is how do we apply compassion into our leadership style and actually provide that from going from the empathy phase into actual compassion. So Julie, just a quick background for people that haven't heard you before. What's your background, please?
Well, my question is, why didn't you listen to the last one? But real quick rundown, art therapist, turned into humanitarian aid worker, leading in mental health and psychosocial support for nearly the past decade. All over the world.
All over the world. And I want to highlight some key things here. Julie has been in some pretty austere places. She's been in Syria. Recently, we talked about Ukraine. Let's see.
Just got back last week.
Yeah. Kenya. What else am I missing?
Yep. I've led trainings in Nigeria, Tanzania. When I was a technical advisor, during COVID, actually, I was leading teams from Colombia all the way to Bangladesh. And then last year I was in Pakistan, I think for 4 months.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so why I highlight that for the audience here is because when we start talking about compassion and how we put that in an actionable piece, right? You've done a lot of stuff with humanitarian aid. And you've done a lot of stuff with, obviously, the nature of your work is actually getting out there and doing stuff. So I want to talk about some key things here of, for example, of how have you seen some success stories with seeing actionable efforts to bring compassion as a leader?
Well, and I think, yes, many examples, and I can certainly give them throughout the episode. But I think the biggest thing that I want to state in the beginning is, especially because I'm obviously American, I have a very strong accent, I'm sure. I'm not going to go into all of these other cultures, places, and work directly with the populations. What my goal is to strengthen whoever's already there, whoever's national of that place, right? So Ethiopian, Kenyan, Pakistani, and to be able to strengthen what they're doing so that they don't need to have somebody like me anymore. That's the whole goal.
Love it. I mean, and that's true because again, as leaders, right, we want to develop these teams and then, we expand, right? So we take people like Julie and we put them somewhere else where we can build better teams and more teams, and those pre-existing teams stay. But that's and we'll talk about it in a later season or series or episode, about sustaining it. But really, that's what as leaders we need to remember is that our job is to build teams, build leaders, grow our organizations. And so if we live in fear of losing our positions, right? And again, I always focus on fear because right now the number one thing people have, I feel, in organizations is their fear of loss of job, fear of position, fear of all these things. And as companies and organizations, we should be striving not to have fear in our workplace.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I was going to jump in real quick and say too, is those are the things that I've been noticing over the past few years is when you look at people who are managers, who are in leadership positions, and when they don't have their own sense of security internal, right? When they're insecure, that's when they're micromanaging. That's when they're jumping in. That's when you see that uncertainty. And so that trickles down to the team. And the team knows okay, well, clearly if my leader doesn't trust what I'm doing, then I don't trust myself. And it creates a fear-based system. So that's not something you want to have.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, if we're trying to build high trust culture environments, fear is the thing we have to avoid. No one can work in a trusted environment if they fear stuff.
We can be scared of something, certainly.
Right.
I'm just thinking about some of the places that I've gone, especially that you've gone to, right? There is that, but it's knowing that the team that you have, that you're with, the people that are surrounding you, that you trust, that they have your back.
Yeah. So expanding on that, right? We shouldn't have, let me rephrase, we shouldn't have fear in our team. We can have fear in the environment around us. We can have fear in the situations that we're in. However, our team should be our strength.
Yes.
Right. And that's, as a team, we can get through anything, but by ourselves, that's where we're going to struggle.
Right.
And if you can't create the high trust culture environment that we need for our teams, then we fall into that place where the team starts falling apart.
Right.
Right. And so when we look at, compassion and leadership, so let's talk about some of those, examples. Do you have some stories of examples where you can say of where you saw some compassion that was really crucial to the success of your teams?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen. Let me just try to pull a few examples, right? Especially in some of these more challenging contexts. A recent one, right, is unfortunately one of the team members when they had left the field. We had gotten news that they had died when they had already gone back home, right? And looking to the leaders on our team that we had, right? Knowing that they would give that space and that time for everybody that was still there on the team to be able to process, and giving them grace to know that they might not be functioning in the way that they should be during that time while they're really trying to process what's been going on.
Yeah, I want to hit one key thing on here because you really hit that point. You know, that's a tough scenario and situation. And, you know, often we think of compassion or the action, right? We think of this like this physical thing we have to do. And something as simple as, hey, our team is not going to be at 100%.
Right.
And that's that grace. And we have to just being understanding as a leader of like, okay, this just happened. I need to allow my team to be at whatever level we're going to be at for the time being so we can all get through this together.
Right.
And if we as a leader go back, let's say we're there and we're empathetic to the situation for a day or two, and then we expect our team to be right back full throttle. Now we're creating the environment of stress and unintentional stress. I'm sure the leader doesn't want that stress, but they're thinking in the back of their head, well, we have to meet this goal, this task, whatever it is. And the reality is you will never hit that task or goal if your team is not okay.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think you hit a really good point on that is, you know, that's a tough one, right? As a leader, another team just like us, we just lost. All of the team is going to feel that. That could have been us. That could have been good friends of theirs, you know, family. Right. I mean, there's so much to digest in that, right? And so, one, I don't even break into the whole grief thing because we and I have talked on that in personal talks on grief, but, you know, allowing just that space, and we're going to go back to what you talked about in the previous episode, space and time.
Yeah.
Allow your people to have space and time if that is what's needed, right? And, you know, there's a time and place for everything, but man, that space is so crucial. And I think you hit a really good one on there. So thank you for that. You know, when you look at the balance between, as we talk about this, the balance between compassion and accountability.
Well, and I think, so what immediately kind of comes into my mind there with that is what systems do you have set up? So then my brain automatically tracks into organizational development and organizational management. And what are the components? Like, do you have systems set up in place to support your team if they need those additional supports? So that was just, I know that's a little sideways, but that was tracking for me because it's just like those pieces are really, really important so that you can kind of step back a little bit to then continue on the process. Yeah.
So I'm going to kind of flip devil's advocacy here on us. I want to say, let's talk about some of the risks. What could be some of the risk if we're showing too much compassion as leaders? What do you think?
Well, is that, I guess my question would be, is that genuine, right? And are you oversharing? There's a difference between compassion and using empathy and all of the positive skills versus oversharing and then actually overloading your team with things that are going on with you. So it's a constant balance that's needed and checking. And again, I'm going to go back to the concept of reflection, because how often do people actually take the time to reflect? There's a lot, space and time. Do we have that? Do we build that into our organization? Or are we just hoping that with the 5,000 things that we need to do this week, this month, whatever, that we're just going to have those skills already built in? And so we're just going to know how to do that.
Yeah. And one of the things that, you know, we focus a lot on personal development and personal issues that are, you know, leading into as a leader. One of the ones I want to highlight is sometimes compassion can be work related. So when I think of that, and what does that mean? What am I talking about here? Let's say you have a member who's struggling to accomplish a task, right? Nothing personal is going on, but they are just in a struggle phase. You know, how do we show compassion for those individuals in that scenario to accomplish those tasks? And then a lot of times, you know, I think the personal ones are actually the harder, you know, piece to hit. But at the same token, people tend to think compassion only comes from helping somebody through personal issues.
Well, no, but do you succeed at everything that you do, all of your tasks. I can tell you right now that some of the things that I'm supposed to do within one of my roles, they're not my strength.
Right.
But that's taken a lot of time of reflection for me, right? Like, I hate Excel. I just do. Like, let's just, I can do it. I can get through, but that is not my skill set. And also it's going to take way more time. So does it make sense then that I'm spending 50% of my time looking at budgets and all of the back end that has to go into all of the Excel for a project, for a team, for whatever? Or is that the space where I just admit that to my team and say, hey, this isn't my strength?
Right.
Can I get some support with this, or can you help me with this?
Yeah.
Knowing that I will take the full load on things that I am really good at. And that's why you have a team, because not everybody can be good at everything.
Yeah. I mean, and so think about this, right? If you're a person, number one, you think you're good at everything, something's going to break. At some point, something will break. And what does that do for that person, right? So that's one thing. Second thing is, when you think about that is you're spot on. You know, as a leader, right, I should be taking my people, and if I'm doing it correctly, I put my people in the places they're strongest.
Right.
And I know my weaknesses, and I know my team's weaknesses, and I know where we can improve, and that's how we come together.
Weaknesses are areas of growth.
Agreed. So like, but I want to hit areas of growth, but also to think about just because it's a weak area doesn't mean that we have to sit here and go, I need to make it a strength. If you can, that's great, but it's not necessarily the solution either.
No.
Knowing your weakness, maybe developing it for future use, but then also, okay, I know that I'm not, let's say Julie knows I'm not, Julie's not great at Excel. Tony, can you help me with this spreadsheet so we can do X, Y, and Z? Does that mean I could teach Julie how to use spreadsheets and she can get better? Absolutely. Doesn't mean she's going to like it.
No, I'm never going to like it.
But she can improve on it.
Those two, yeah, exactly. Those shortcuts, that's key. And that will absolutely help me.
My favorite is Simon Sinek talks about, and my audience is going to know Simon Sinek's my favorite, so I'm always reference him. But Simon Sinek talks about, if you walk into a room of people you hired and you're the smartest person in the room, you haven't hired the right people.
Right. And
so I'll be the first to admit, just like Simon Sinek calls himself an idiot, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But I am the kind of person that if I can understand it, I can help make sure everybody understands it. I will always ask those questions to understand and look like the idiot in the room, because I feel like, I remember when I was younger, I never asked questions in school because I didn't want to look like an idiot. The reality is there's probably at least 5 other people in that room who have the same dang question, and you just too afraid to ask.
See, and you and I are the opposite, because I am now limited. I'm just thinking about when I was in Ukraine recently, like one of the branch teams or one of the interregional, whatever, he's head of operations, and we built up, it started out as a very formal, engagement relationship with one another. But then he kind of got to know me, right? And now we're at a point where when I walk in, he's like, Julie, today you have 5 questions. Because otherwise, and then of course my brain forms everything in questions. And so I'm just like, shit. Okay, great.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's knowing that and being able to ask those questions is so important.
Yeah. So as we tie this in and we start wrapping this episode up a little shorter than others, really we're just talking about here is bridging the gap. How do we take the compassion, put it into actionable results for our teams? And so with that, what I encourage the audience to think about here is, as you go to reflect through your day and through the week, think about how you're applying your compassion, your empathy into compassion, and taking those actionable pieces to improve the team and the organization. And notice that we're talking about not us. It's not, as a leader, I don't do these things for me, right? We do these things for the greater of the organization, and even more importantly, the person.
Right.
And really thinking about becoming the giving of the side versus the taking of the side of what most people get accustomed to, right?
Yeah.
As bosses, right? I say the word boss, a lot of taking in the word boss. I'm taking your time. I'm taking your effort. I'm taking your whatever it is. Let's start giving.
Right.
I'm giving you space to make better decisions. I'm giving you the opportunity to learn something new and excel beyond what you currently have. We need to start giving. And so that's, as we go into this series into episode 3, we're going to talk about building a culture of care and really talking about how compassion is the core of leadership. And that's going to be the core of evolutionary leadership as we talk about the transformative, adaptable leader. So stay tuned for episode 3 coming to you next week on this series of Compassion Unleashed. Thanks again, Julie, for being here, and we will see you all next week.
See you next week. Bye.